Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gen Con Online Day 4, the last day, but it doesn't mean that we do not have anything to show or to talk to during the last day, because we have here, not in our studio, but very close, David, the man who is responsible for, I don't know, David, it is that moment when you design more solo stuff rather than standalone games. Are you counting those?
Hi. Yes and no. It's tricky. I counted a few months ago about how many solo modes have I designed that the public knows about, and I was, I think, around 38 at the time. And I have definitely not designed 38 published games or soon to be published games yet. But on the other hand, it's kind of cheating because when I design a game, that's anywhere between 2 months to 8 years of my life, whereas a solo mode is usually a lot less than that because, as I'm sure in one of your many questions you'll ask, you'll find out that I'm the architect, I'm the puppeteer, I'm not the soldier running through the trenches when it comes to solo game design.
That's really funny because basically this year I must say that there is very hard to spot a game that is either not mainly design or co-design, or you have a solo mode inside. So you are actually everywhere.
But I try. But my actual designs, and I don't differentiate between co-design and lead design because I'm just enthusiastic to work with other people that I love their brains of. But for solo modes, what I always say is it needs to be a good game. You can't make a good solo mode for a bad game. So the way I view it, being able to make a good solo mode for it is already a seal of approval I can do. Second, it's a pattern, and at that point, the only bottleneck I have on how many solo modes I can design in a year, in a month, in a day, is the number of people willing to then try it out, that solo mode. So as long as they're lining up and claiming to be enjoying it, then, sign me up.
But before we jump into the designing process, let's go back to the roots. What was the breaking point for you to jump into the solo adventure? It was because the market says that we want solo module in our games to buy it, or it was you woke up one day and say I want to design solo modes?
Well, it was definitely not the latter. The way it started was 2015, 16, I don't know, years always mashed together, when Minecraft Games and I were preparing for the first Kickstarter of Anachrony. And they already had one successful Kickstarter behind them. I was, 1.5 tiny, nobody cared about kind of game published behind me. We all wanted the best for the game, and we were discussing what to do as a stretch goal. And I said, why don't we make a solo mode? I was like, why would anybody want to play board games solo? I was like, I don't know, but if they pay for it, why not? Okay, how does that work? Viticulture Tuscany and Viticulture just came out, and Morten Monrad Petersen, the founder of Automa Factory, created a solo mode for it, and I happened to have that game. And I was like, all right, let's open up how Tuscany does it and see if I can learn from it. And I played 2 rounds of Tuscany solo before I was like, okay, this is brain work. How can I adapt it to the kind of brain work I like? And for the original solo mode of Anachrony, it was mostly trial and error and people playing it and people saying they like this, they don't like that. And then I got lucky because Anachrony got very successful, and the solo mode came when it wasn't standard yet, and in the heavier than viticulture world, there were almost none, and people said, oh my god, this works. And by the time they figured that it didn't, I was already running away with the success. So, and then the second step was I always knew somewhere deep down in my heart that I want to do game design as a living. And while royalties and publishing games are nice, you can't really tell the electrical bill collector saying, I'm definitely getting royalties in December, can you please come back then? So I needed to find a way to, earn a little bit every month. And I was helping my good buddy Dave Kirkhope develop Petrichor, and I was like, shall I design a solo mode for it? And one of my volunteers from the Anachrony playtester group, Nick Shaw, was super helpful with that, and we put it together, and it went great. We made it smarter, and then step by step, I got to a point. I was like, all right, I'm almost there where I can do this for full-time living. What can we do? And I called up you guys, of all people, and said, hire me. And Andre said, yeah, but what can you do? I'm like, I can help edit rule books. I can play the game with my buddies and tell you how I would make it better. I don't know. I guess I can make solo modes. I've done one for Dice Settlers for you guys. Do you want me to try it for other games? And Andre said, we'll see. And I was on the playtester and development team for Teotihuacan, and I remember complaining immensely and then fighting for tiny little rule changes that, in my opinion, made the game massively better. And then about less than a month before going to print date, when we finished Dice Settlers, everything went off, but Teotihuacan still had a month left till print date. I was like, hey, Andre, do you want me to design a solo mode for this one as well? Nah, nobody wants this. This is not Kickstarter. I mean, I have a free weekend. I can make one. And the rest, as they say, is history. And once Teotihuacan came out, and I suddenly had Teotihuacan wasn't my game, but there were two games in the top 100 with solo modes by me, Anachrony and Teotihuacan. Then suddenly, I was, besides Morten, the other guy with solo modes. And then the publishers kept calling. It's like, could you design a solo mode for this? Could you design a solo mode for that? The next Mindclash game, Cerebria, Nick and I spent months sweating the proper AI for that. And I learned it on the fly, and I've redone the Anachrony solo modes, because based on what I've learned since, I don't think the original ones were good anymore. And success breeds success. And now they ask me, and I can help, and I can tackle many different games and make them solo modes because I've done many games. And it's like when you put a game in front of me, you teach me the rules, and I'm like, all right, I'll use the randomizer from Petrichor, I'll use the interaction points from Teotihuacan, and it's like I know. To me, the solo mode is about simulating the interaction with another player. So make a game that I enjoy interacting with another player, and the rest is just a deck of cards or a few tiles and a die to make you do the same things that I've seen you do across the table.
Yeah, we will dive in deeper in the second part, like how you mimic the behavior of the human being. You are actually creating the AI inside the board game, but we will go back to that later. Like, I want to talk a little bit about also the moment when the industry start looking on solo as one of the selling point of selling games. Because you mentioned that like 2016-17 was that moment when you decided to work on solo for Anachrony, and 2017 was also the year when we as a Board&Dice decided to prepare the Kickstarter, which happened in 2018, of Superhot, the card game, which is basically only solo game. And we will talk a little bit about only solo game, what you think about those in a second. But in 2017, when we had a booth on during Spiel, there was, I don't know, few people that came to booth, watch the game, look on the box, and say, "Is this game has a solo mode?" Right? It was like you could count those crazy people using only one hand. Now, like the last time I was on real actual physical convention in 2019, it is like the game must or should have a solo mode. Like it is maybe it's a weird psychological behavior, because I strongly believe that more of those people do not ever play the game they are buying, and they wanted from this game to also play solo. They do not playing it solo, but the I don't know, the safe spot that at least if no one will play with me this game, I will at least want to play this game solo because it has a solo mode.
I think that's how it might have started. The fallback, I don't know whether I'll get this game to the table, at least it'll be fine either way. But the faster our hobby and the market's offering is expanding, while the mass market edges keep expanding and people keep finding more and more accessible games that reach more and more people, the core audience, the hardcore strategy gamers, aren't expanding at the speed the market's offering expands. Which means that unless you're gathering people specifically to try out all the new stuff and train them for strategy games and everything, then nobody will get a game group that likes everything from terraforming Mars to Architects of the West Kingdom to on Mars. So because but for the core enthusiast that wants to play the board game to understand and feel smart about the board game, for them it's like, I want to see more things, I want to see different things, I want to see a game that's not like that other game. And convincing your game group of all of those every time, that I see that you will like this thing, so let's play something that's completely different. That's like a social hurdle. And at that point, knowing that you can investigate a game and you can have fun just by understanding it, because understanding is the play, that is a new experience that previously only such a small core was looking for, that it was not a market worth exploiting. And then this got sped up by obviously the pandemic, that some people were forced, like, you either play the solo or you don't play your favorite games. And then the quality of the supply caught up to the size of the supply and the quality of the demand. And solo mode started becoming better. I hope I had some part in it, but I mostly focus on heavy strategy Euros. Whereas now we're seeing it more and more from light roll and writes to everything upwards, that solo mode games are becoming less like Yahtzee on steroids, or a solitaire, shuffle the cards and hope you can deal them in the right order, and more like proper strategic experiences. And anybody joining the hobby now or a year ago or 2 years ago looking for solo games will have access to, I want to say good enough, but I mean good solo modes and solo playable board games that are fun to play solo, not because you don't have access to other people, but because it is actually fun. So it's no longer a plan B, it's as good as a plan A. And that to me has always been my solo design philosophy, is that I am not here to design a solo variant of the game. I am here to make the solo player like the game for the same reason I liked the 2 and 3 player game.
Okay, that is very interesting. I will just stay a second with how the market shift. It was funny to see, because the moment when board gamers wanted to have a solo mode in games is also the same moment in video game history when video game publishers start forgetting a solo mode in their games. Like in the next games like Call of Duty and so on, they put less and less effort or single player mode for more interesting things in multiplayer, where board games start for multiplayer, and now discovering the solo mode for games. This happens.
I can't talk about video games. I don't think I've played anything for, like, I've spent a few hours building something in Factorio a year ago, but discounting that, I don't think I've played much video games for the past 10 years or so.
But talking about experience from solo, because when we start doing or consider solo mode for games, we think about them as, okay, people will use solo mode for teaching, self-teaching of the game. You're like yeah, because like we are still in the moment in the history, like a few years ago, when people are saying, what, solo mode? Why to waste time to develop a solo mode in a game? So at that moment, at least how I perceive solo, like people will play solo only for the reason to teach themselves the game before the gaming group jump in and we will start playing the game. But you are saying that you are rather want to give, like, okay, what is your goal and how you achieve that? Because you said that you want to give the interesting experience for the people who loves multiplayer game, also during solo game, and maybe rediscover the game for the second time, or you try to mimic the behavior of the gamer, so the person who play solo will feel that he's playing with another person.
I like heavy strategy Euro games because I enjoy that internal mental high five when I did it. I feel smart. I had a plan, and even if I lose, I achieved I'm working towards this, And when a solo mode is either a alternative variant, like a puzzle to solve, or a beat your own score training hoop, then did I achieve anything? No, I, run the circle around the building. There's a reason I am not good at training for the marathon, because running circles around the building is boring. So when at that point in my life when I still played my own solo modes for Anachrony, Petrichor, Days of Fire, Dice Settlers, then the games I design, I obviously enjoy. If I don't think the game is great, it will definitely not see the light of day. Sure, somebody can dislike them for that or that, but I need to think that whatever I tried, I did the best way I could. And then I played the solo modes for the games I believed in, and I was like, I don't like this. No, this is boring. It's like, I need to score 5 more points there. I can do that if I don't play the... It was not making me think like playing an opponent. If I play an opponent, I worry what they will play. I try to guess, will it be going this direction or going that direction? I can try to hurt them. I can try to bait them, depending on the interaction level of the game. And I wanted the solo mode to do that. And what Viticulture being my learning experience, that's the only thing I can compare it to. What Viticulture did great was that you flip the card, it said where the automa blocks a space on the board, and then it took that space exactly how in a multiplayer game. So it was no longer I need to get X points by the end of the round. Therefore, if I do this action, and this action, that's half X. But if I do that, and that is X plus 1. Therefore, I win. That's just a puzzle. What I didn't like about Viticulture's Automa, and Morten and I have discussed this many times, and we learned from each other over the years, is that when I play you in Viticulture and I look over to your player board, I'm like, I'm betting you're rushing to harvest first turn next season. Whereas with the bot, I had zero inclination whether it's going to block harvest, whether it's going to block visitors or what. It lacked predictability. It lacked meaningful interaction. If it blocked my space, it blocked my space randomly or incidentally, not
because of reasons.
Exactly. So in Anachrony, I solved this by a fairly complicated state machine that always told you what the next possible actions can be. People who've played Tawantinsuyu will see how that concept kept on evolving. But over the years, for 7 out of 10 games these days, my go-to version is where what the bot does go on a card, just like in good old Viticulture, but you put 3 of them face up. And each of them are very easy to parse what they can be. They're not a giant flow chart with a million sub-steps. That's what I'm still trying to simplify to get it right. And then on your turn, you can read the 3 cards that the bot has in front of it and says, okay, if this card gets resolved, it will block me there. If that card gets resolved, it block me there. Another thing is, always use skewed odds. The first card has 50%, the second card has 30%, the third card has 20% chance of being resolved. Either use a die or loaded deck, whatever. And that creates the same thinking in my head as looking over to your player board, understanding your overarching strategy, and says, if I understand your strategy perfectly, you're taking this action, although you might be taking this action, although there's a tiny chance you're taking that action. And then I plan my turn saying, do I need to rush there because you might take it? Do I need to block you there because otherwise you get a lot of points? Or do I need to plan for next? And once I finish my turn, a randomizer picks between these 3 actions and resolves that. I reduced your thinking of what I consider to be your strategy to a die roll. And that's where the running joke comes from, that I don't need to be smart. I just need to be smarter than you as a deck of cards. So, but the interesting thing isn't what the bot does. The interesting thing is how I decide my turn based on what I've read on those 3 cards.
Yeah, that's actually, you point out the very good point of thinking about solo. It's actually, but in the same moment, we just downgrade the people you are playing, like the people you are playing with, and the difference between solo mode, which is a bunch of cards and protocols, is that you can predict human behavior, and in solo you cannot, but you can at least try to mimic the idea of prediction an AI move, and this sounds very.
I never call my bots AIs because there is no intelligence in them. They are they carry out some simulation of a human play completely unintelligently. What makes it feel smart is that you can anticipate it, because you can't anticipate the next number to be drawn from the lottery, but you can anticipate an intelligent human being. Therefore, you project that intelligence onto the randomness because it gave you a warning. And that's where the central idea came from. And everything I've done since this central idea came was to distill it. Because if you look at Anachrony, Dice Settlers, Teotihuacan, they all are predictable, but they are predictable over an umbrella picture. Whereas if you look at some of my more recent solo modes, Tekkenu or Campaign EV, there it's like you can literally play out the bot's next turn in your head this sharp. It's like, it's either going to go there or it's going to go there. So distill it. It's like, understand what possible things you need to contend with. And yes, the bot cheats, but it's not cheating, because cheating is outside of the rules, and the bot is not outside of the rules. The bot is inside its own rules. And the reason it needs to cheat is because our Euro games tend to make life hard on purpose, because if you could, pay for every action in Tekken, the game would be very easy. Therefore, sometimes you have to slow down and produce or waste a few happiness in building more houses. But the bot's job is just that over 16 simulated turns, do roughly as much as a human would. But a human knows how to combo cards, a human knows when to use a scribe to pip a die, etc. The bot doesn't know any of these things. Therefore, the bot doesn't manage resources. The bot will take 16 actions free of cost and resolve all of them. Bot will never combo, will never adjust the die if adjusting by one would be a huge boon to it, etc. So this is the abstraction of bots that you don't want to play against yourself. You should never be forced to think through every pathway for the bot that you're thinking through yourself. And the second thing is that, as much as possible, you should never make a choice against yourself. Classic good old wargamer solo mode. If the Napoleon could go left or right, pick whichever is worse for you.
Yes, this is.
And if the game is strategic enough, the answer is, well, I have problems with both. Which one is worse? Depends. So I do occasionally leave player choice in the game in a solo mode, but then I always assume they'll pick whatever they want. So I never, in fact, I say you can choose either. I never say pick against yourself. I say pick whichever you want. The bot didn't care. The bot let you pick. And the more you pick bits are in a bot, the more overcompensation I tend to give it. And this is relevant when you can't predict small details of an opponent's turn, where it's like, it could go either way, I don't know, I don't care. In that case, I just tend to let the player make the choice, but set the goal higher to make them sweat for it more. So simplicity, predictability, strategic replayability. If you play the same bot twice, you should play two different games. If you play Yahtzee twice, or pick whatever lightest roll and write you can think of, then your immediate A or B push your luck choices will be different, but the way you play the game will be the same. Whereas when you play a proper strategy game against a human being, there are other things that change your play besides the difference in the market's offer. And I wanted the bot to manipulate, to simulate that as well. So sometimes in some games, the bot specializes. Trismegistus has the mastery cards, and Trismegistus was one of the hellishly most difficult effort to complexity bots to make, because the game is super smart, but most of the smarts are in your own combos. And you can't predict what combos the other does, and you don't even try. Therefore, if the bot didn't do those combos, it would be very dumb. And if it did do them, it would be very complicated. And what we ended up doing was a specializing randomizer curve. And then the problem came that if you played on the low curve, then pro players could quadruple its score. If you played on the high curve, then it could quadruple newbie players' scores. So that's another solo mode that we had to adjust after the fact. But always, it's about, you need to have every source of enjoyment except table talk that the multiplayer game gives you from the solo mode.
Yeah, like it is so hard to me to understand, because the solo mode need to be a challenge for you every time you play it, right? But how you can achieve that if solo bot cannot make a combo? And for example, you have a game where you can score one, like there is 10 points when you will be doing, but you will score 10 plus X point if make combos from your movement, from your cards putting together, and so on and so on. So how it's possible that solo bot will be challenging every time you play? After you said that you cannot mimic that solo bot will make a combos because this
because so the bot
like,
can't optimize. Yes. So what would I do?
Yeah.
What I would do is I would play the game myself. I would play the game with the best player I can find, and I would play the game with a newbie player who just learned the game and suffers through it. And I write down the curves of the game. How far do you get in how many turns? How many victory points do you finish on? How many buildings have you built? How many dice did you lock between your 4 building tiles? And then I say, if all you did in the whole game was build buildings, you will have 14 of them. Therefore, if the bot picks build every turn, it should end up with 14 buildings. And if you pick the other action, all the times you'll end up with 14 of something else. And then either the bot completely randomly picks between them because any combination is sensible, which is what I did in Tekkenu, where it says, if the dice is not there, don't pick that, but if it's there, it's a valid combination because every combination in Tekkenu is valid. But in other games where once you've done 3 steps in this direction, nobody in their right mind would go that way, then I need to make a bit more complicated bot where the bot doubles down on its strategy, where it focuses. You can do it by the action giving a marker that increases the chances of that action being picked again. You can do it by going up tracks and the tracks appearing conditions on which action to pick, whatever. And once I know that the newbie can hit this point by the end of the game, I can hit this point, and the good player can hit that point, then I'll aim the bot to roughly beat me. If the first or second time I'm playing a game that is not too punishing against newbies, I score, 100 points, then I'll aim the bot for 110. And then I'll create difficulty increases. In the early days, this was a long list in the rule book saying, change this 2 to a 3, add another gold whenever you do that. These days, I try to do more of a singular rule change, or every time A happens, also do B kind of big rule changes, and put them on cards and say, draw 2 of them if you want to play on normal, draw 5 of them if you want to play on hard, because then players don't have to write little sticky notes for themselves to change the rules. And basically, it's simulating a curve. And if I raise that curve a little bit, then instead of on 110, it will finish on 130. So if you're suffering with the game and you have trouble hitting 100, then take out this, take out that, and then it'll then you catch up. I will lose on 110, or better players tend to win my bots on first play, barely, and then they start adding their challenges. And the challenges are all like what in a human you would consider shameless cheating. It's like every time it takes the blue action, take another 5 victory points because I said so. And then you're like, oh God, I can't let the bot take a blue action. But it's not, I didn't say add 30 points to the end of the game because there's nothing you can do about it. I said every time it does the blue action, it gets 5 points.
Okay.
But what if you draft the die that it needs for the blue action, then it won't take. So you start outplaying the bot. Once side-by-side play is too easy for you, I add in the rules where you can't win by side-by-side playing. You have to play against the bot. And then the very, very thin line to walk is that I try not to make the games, the bots gamey, that you should never win a solo game with a strategy that would never work in multiplayer. And the first Anachrony solo mode had this exact problem that if you passed early every era, you would beat the bot, whereas if you pass early in every multiplayer game, you just immediately lose. So, it's live and learn. And luckily, again, success breeds interest. Playtesters graduating into developers. I've already mentioned Nick Shaw. I should definitely mention John Albertson. The Dark Ages and Venice I've done with Xavi Bordes, and David Digby, who is becoming a solo mode designer with a name by himself as well. And I just got a new team member who will soon debut in some of your games that I can't yet talk about. So, it's a team effort, and it's a vision. I come with a promise and a pattern that give me a reasonably interactive, strategic, replayable game, and I will make you play it alone. And people like that, and
I catch one thing that is also a nice conclusion. If you want to add special rules for the solo bot, those special rules should not be only there to try to mimic the real person, but try to add to the strategy of you trying to decode.
Yes. The solo mode's job is not to make the bot play like a human. The solo mode's job is to make you play like you play against a human. I don't need the bot to have fun. I need you to have fun.
Exactly. So because it is so tempting and easy to do a solo mode when you add a bunch of extra rules you need to carry on and you need to think about, so it will feel like you are playing against human. And sometimes when I'm thinking about playing a game in solo mode, and I have this, oh my god, I will have to think and know all those extra special rules for the solo. But actually, if those extra rules are there for the bot being challenging, it can be more accepted by the people because of that, not only because of to keeping alive the solo bot. So
which is why the extra rules always, like the inhumane rules, always go in as challenge increases, not as core rules. Several of my bots, for some people, Teotihuacan, but that wasn't that bad, but most recently Excavation Earth, people mentioned that when they read the solo rules, it's horrifying. It's like, oh my god, 10 points of priority list. How will my brain ever remember this? And once they learn the game to play, once they play well, they find that they can guess what the solo rules are saying, because I need the solo priorities to mimic the choices that an opponent would make. Therefore, if you understand what choice an opponent would make in this situation, and you look up the bot priorities in the rulebook, you'll find that that's the choice the bot makes, because that's what makes sense. So detailed rules to mimic human behavior tend to be a high fence to climb, but once you climbed it, it's super easy. Whereas difficulty increaser, special rules seem easy to climb, but you forget them every time you do, which is why lately, as I said, I've been putting them onto cards or in front of the players to know that this is something you have to deal with.
There is a question in the chat section from Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Question for David. What do you enjoy more, designing games or designing the solo mode for games? Also, can we please have some spoilers for the next games you are working on?
So the first one, and I hope none of my solo fans take this the wrong way, obviously I enjoy designing games a lot more because there I'm designing. The other one is refining a process. It's the first time I put down the tenets of solo interactivity, which sounded like an oxymoron when you started, and now it's the law, was a process and was lots of revelations compounded on each other. But today, literally, I have designed solo modes of games I've never played because they just explained the rules to me, showed it to me on TTS, and I created a step 1, you need to simulate this. Step 2, you need to simulate that. Step 3, you need to simulate that. I handed it over to one of my developers, and they made a brilliant solo mode out of it. So it's a procedure. I am always on the lookout on how to improve that procedure. I am always on the lookout on applying the procedure to something that previously was impossible. Dudes on a Map games famously was my system would create monstrosities, but I'm getting there. With Dark Ages, I got fairly manageable level solo modes for a Dudes on a Map game, and next month I'm trying my luck with another Adam Kapinski game for another publisher, something about the Norse gods or something, and that's a Dudes on a Map game. So that expanding my toolkit is exciting, but what keeps my brain aflame, what makes me work, 15 hours a day is designing new things and no compromisingly giving that exact player experience that I'm looking for every player count. And I tend to mostly focus on 3-player and then make sure that the 2-player is not boring and the 4-player is not draggy compared to that. And then the solo mode's job is to give back the 2 and 3. So short answer, yes, I am a designer first and the solo developer second. Spoilers.
And David, I'm sorry to chip in before you will answer the second question.
Oh, this is where the snipers shoot me down, so I can't spoil anything.
No. Basically, you look like you create your own matrix of solo bots, like in the movie Matrix, when they are kept in those bottles, and you have your own matrix of solo bots in some dimension. You just
and I can just pull them out and operate out of them and diagnose
now
them.
because I'm also excited about the second part of Jessica's question.
Okay, spoilers. So remind me, which upcoming games have Board&Dice announced already?
Founders of Teotihuacan.
Yes, I heard that the designer is a nice fella. I first played the game many moons ago, and it's a lovely spatial puzzle with a primary drafting-like interaction, which made me terribly afraid of it for 2 reasons. If the only, and it sounds like I'm judging, but I'm not, if the only interaction in a game is a draft from a central pool of actions, then the solo is innately not interesting, because which one will you pick? This one or that one? Whatever, I'll take the other one. And second, because it's spatial. I am terrible at spatial, and because if I don't put 2 Lego bricks next to each other, I can't tell you whether they fit or not. But furthermore, bots are terrible at spatial, because saying things like, take the biggest victory point tile is easy when there's a number on the tile. But when saying, take the tile that fits the best, that's a really hard thing to say, because what's the measurement of fits the best? And then you're asking the player to figure it out for themselves, and I've said already I don't want that. So Founders, for the longest time, I was like, do I want to do a solo mode for it? If I do my full thing, it won't work. Nobody will like it. It's not as heavy. It's still thinky. It's fun game, but like my solo fans will be disappointed if I do that. And as time went by between me first playing Founders and the deadline approaching, I worked on lots of lighter games. And I worked on Origins. And on Origins, as some people might have heard, due to production trickinesses, we ended up doing 2 solo modes, one of which is technically, the simpler one, is technically a beat your own score solo mode. And I am famously against beat your own score solo modes, because how am I smarter than myself? Who am I congratulating there? But I figured out what parameters to change to still feel good enough. And I was like, all right, if we approach Founders' solo mode like that, and then we inject a challenge system to make it replayable, because Origins' training mode is not meant to be replayable because there's another mod that is replayable infinitely, then maybe the people that aren't the heaviest strategy players and love Founders in multiplayer will be able to get the same love from solo. And Turczi and I spent, I think, 2 days nonstop talking about it, and the testers' feedback was great on it. So yes, Founders, I can definitely tease. It is having a solo mode, and it's not a heavy automa like most of my stuff, but it has a very heavy stamp of approval from me on it.
Thank you. And I'm so happy that the Founders have a solo mode, because, like, I cannot design solo. Like, I tried to design solo for Mandala Stones, and find out that not only designing a solo mode is something I don't know, at least yet, designing a solo for abstract game, it is...
No, if it's any consolation, I wouldn't have offered to do a solo mode for Mandala Stones either. So, although if I had to, I've heard that there's a very good fan-made solo for Azul, so I would probably go and check how that guy did it, and see if I can learn from it and combine it with my approach. Have you ever told... Yeah?
Yeah, go on.
Have you ever told anyone about the next game that I might be helping out with?
So when it comes to our games, 2022, the games which are officially out when it comes to announcements is Founders of Teotihuacan. Everything else is still in the shadow, and I can only spoil that after Gen Con and during Spiel, this will be the moment for those games to show up on the map of board games. But I am so much very interested in other games, not only made and published by Board&Dice in the upcoming years, which you could, by accident, spoil.
Well, it's no secret that Voidfall is coming to Kickstarter 9 days from now, and it's a Euro game fused with a Space 4X empire builder from Nigel Buckle and myself. It will definitely be solo playable, but unlike most of my heavy Euros, it won't have an automa. It will have a proper co-op mode, which I couldn't tell whether insultingly or lovingly called it Spirit Island in space, but you know what, I'll take it. So it has a co-op mode where you play the exact same things as you do in the competitive mode, just with a different motivation, and that co-op mode scales down to 1 player. So, we're not trying to out Twilight Imperium. We're doing our own spin on what space and 4X and empire building can be for a Euro player. So that's definitely coming. What's next? Oh God. Imperium just came out in retail a few months ago, and I just can't stop playing with it. So I can't say what's coming in the future because Osprey hasn't told me I can, but maybe I'm working on something. What other game is there? I'm almost done designing a new game, co-designing a game, because I do have this bad habit of wanting to co-design with all of my favorite designers. So I sat down with one Simone Luciani. The game is not signed yet, so I can't tell you who's going to publish it. But people that like Brass or Barrage will like this one for sure. Hopefully, I don't know, 2023, 2024. We'll see where that's going. I've spent 1 or 2 spoilers about it online, so I can say this much. What else am I working on? Oh, Perseverance obviously is getting episode 3 and episode 4 next year. Excavation Earth just had a expansion, and if anybody asked why is there no big box, we said maybe you'll find out later. So I don't know, maybe they will. I think that's I think that's
maybe I will ask you for from a different angle. How many games will come up from you next year?
Oh God. How do you define come? As in be on Kickstarter or ship from a Kickstarter 2 years ago or plus release?
Yes, like we will see let's say 5 games of which you design or co-design next year. How many we can, like, because people need to secure their money.
Some, like, not solo modes, but like games I designed or co-designed. I think next year it's around 3 to 5, but this is where I normally find out that there's like another 6 I've forgotten about. Oh yes, it's been long pushed back because he's just one man and COVID and everything. But Richard Breeze and I co-designed a game a few years ago together, and it's planned to come out next year. And I'm actually starting the solo mode design of it any second now, as soon as Voidfall lets me, sleep and eat. So that's coming. I don't know. If I knew you were gonna ask me that, I would have created my list, because I can't think about how many projects.
The spoilers show up only if you are not expecting such questions. When I'm asking this because you will forget and you will say something you should not to say yet, and this is what people interesting.
Yeah, but I have to remember the things I'm allowed to say, and I have to remember to not say the things I'm not allowed to say. Do you know how difficult all of this is?
There is the discussion in the chat group regarding a solo, and I believe it starts by Silencer. I guess my issue with solo is that it's so much work to set up a big table game just to play alone and following. My issue is less of the social aspect than the time sink issue. I was okay with something like Deep Space D6 or Proving Grounds, little setup and decent solo play, not having to deal with something like Teotihuacan taking the whole table, taking a ton of time to learn and assemble, then learning more rules for that.
Okay. I can't see the question, but if I got most of the bits you said, then thank you. I enjoy whichever games the Oscar person you like to enjoy. I can promise you 90% of my projects you're not the target audience of for solo. Sorry. if the primary hurdle to playing a game as heavy as Teotihuacan is the size of the table, then I'm sorry, that's not a primary consideration of mine. Except if you go get Roman roll, because that's supposed to fit on a table this big and set up in solo for 5 minutes. But it's still a heavy euro, so have fun.
Yeah, but I believe also that Silencer, his issue is that he don't mind play heavy games, but playing solo of a heavy game, which in most cases heavy game means a lot of table presence and setup, and just to play with myself, it may be like, I don't know, offense for a lot of people to try solo.
Yes, and this is a discussion I've most recently had with one Vital Lacerda, who used to design his own solo modes, and his solo modes are barely more than training modes for his game. And he says, my games are super complicated. Why would I ask for more work from the poor players' minds? And sometimes this works out for him brilliantly. Gallerist is notable for a very good solo mode. I'm trying to think which one was the other one that my team said had a very good solo mode. But when the game's goodness comes from subtleties, then by picking the easier option, you diminish the game. When I was recruiting testers for a Vital Lacerda project, and I asked them which games they like, and there were 1 or 2 people that only played solo. And they said, for example, that Vinnos was one of their least liked Lacerda game. While for me and a few others that have played a lot of Lacerda multiplayer, they said Vinnos is one of the best ones. And it's because that game is ran on nuances. And if you do a simple solo mode, which is just, go play the game, and by the way, here's a little problem for you to overcome, it's just not as good a game as the main one. So to me, this is a budgeting problem. If the game is this complicated and this good, then how much more extra brain budget can I throw on in order to not lose goodness? And I tend to err on the side of make it as good as possible and then try to simplify it. But as I get older and lazier, I have tried starting with something simple and then adding back the smarts. I will always choose, I will never be happy with a very simple to run solo mode if it's visibly weaker than the multiplayer game. If this means I'm asking too much extra rules to learn, the slower learners of my solo tester group often say that they tend to play half a game two-handed against themselves, not trying to strategize, just to get the multiplayer rules down and then learn the bot. Is it asking too much? For some people, probably. Do I think that based on the responses that the people who did climb the hills and did see the sunshiny fields on the other side, Tawantinsu being the best example for this, they say it's worth it. So if next time I make a smaller hill to climb, but it's still a swamp on the other side, then they'll be disappointed. So I promise I will work on making the climb easier and easier, but my goal is always to get the sunshiny vista on the other side and not to make it easy for first timers. And that's actually sometimes true for my multiplayer games as well. Hopefully less.
Yes, and my advice for those people who want to try solo of, I don't know, they like heavy games, they want to try to play it solo, but they are afraid of setting up the game just to play it by myself. I believe Tabletopia and TTS is made for solo mode, because you can just launch the module and the work is done. You can play, the game is fully set up and you can play solo without this effort of assembling and deassembling the game. So yeah, basically that is my advice to try to dive into solo adventure. The last question, because we are run out of time, is that you said, and this was very surprising, I'm also I can believe for more of the people, that you are not playtesting your solo mode, right?
Yes.
Did I catch it correctly?
Well, you know me, so you can definitely attest to this. I talk all the time, non-stop. I listen, but I listen by absorbing whatever you're saying and putting it into the things I'm saying. Solo, to me, and not just solo, sitting down and assembling things, or like anything that's focus on a procedure, and like even a remotely complicated procedure, and follow through while also try and think, is to me torture. It's finally this year I've been officially diagnosed with ADHD, so I'm not just weird, but there is actually how my brain works. But when I was putting the final touches down to Perseverance's solo mode, and I urgently needed to test something, and I didn't have time to update the TTS module, and my local playtester was not available that day, I set up the game. I was like, damn it, David, you can do it. Don't be a little diva. Play one game of Perseverance solo so you can test it. And halfway through the fourth turn, I noticed that the following thing happened. bot turn step 1, play my turn step 1, bot turn step 2, my next turn step 1, bot's previous. It's like the linearity of time went out of the window, because the moment I thought of, don't forget to resolve step 3, I resolved step 3. Oh wait, but I was actually on step 5 of the next turn. What am I doing here? So it's like, if my brain very rarely does that in a multiplayer game, then it's like, whose turn is it? Sorry, are we doing the upkeep? Let's resolve it step by step. That keeps me in check. If I have nobody to talk to, I feel like the mad person standing in front of a mirror and shouting at themselves. So while I absolutely had to, and while I did it without time pressure, and while I did it focusing only one thing at a time, I could play a few solos. But it's like, for me, I need to understand that it's fun. I can't have that fun myself. And it's not because I don't like solos. Like, I understand what makes them likable. I can't focus on it. It's like, sure, I would love to craft handmade furniture, but if you give me a set of instructions and say, think about this, think about that, then while I'm thinking about it, I'll forget to pull the other screw. And that's pretty much how I'm playing solos. So luckily, there are great minds out there that both like playing solo and can play solo, and over the months and the years learned from me what I consider good interaction and bad interaction. And these days, it's before I even finish the game, before I even start the solo, when it's like over to them, this is the interactions we're simulating, thoughts. And they started getting tester credits, then developer credits, and these days even half of my solo modes are co-designs, because Nick or John or Xavi or David, or soon to be Jeremy, did it with barely any manual interference from me. I laid out the ideas, I laid out the interactions, I laid out the form, the flow, and the rest is just, play it. Tell me if that if is stupid there, and then pull it out.
So basically, if I tell to you to be a better designer, you should play more board games. For you, being a better solo designer, asking you for play more solo games will be a torture.
Yes, I will never. What I talk to more and more people on what they like in a solo mode. And if A says, I dislike that solo mode, and B says, but that solo mode is great, then I'm like, why? And I won't try to please them both. I'll draw my own conclusions. And then I'll try to apply those conclusions to C, and then ask those two people, hey, you liked that game, is this worse? Hey, you hated that game solo, is this better? And if the first says no, the second one yes, then I've learned something.
That's great. That's great. It is like it's because I wanted to ask you how you can improve your skill set when it comes to solo designing, but you actually did answering that question. And and basically that's all, David. Even though I will be happy to talk to you for the next 6 hours straight, we are not able to do so because also there are other people who want to jump in, and we cannot focus only on you, David. I'm sorry.
What?
I promise you there will be.
You can. You shouldn't.
I will just tell you that the last comment in our chat section. Thank you for all you both do for board gaming, and I think this is the best way how we can close this this conversation. Thank you all. You jump in to listen us both talking about solo gaming, and mainly David talking, because I cannot design a solo mode, and I don't even try because there is David who will do it. And this is like I heard on the Facebook or some other social media platform that you are, David, that's solo boat guy. So this is your nickname these days, a solo bot guy.
Yeah. Be nice or I'll send my bots against you.
Yeah. So thank you, David, and go back and design some stuff this weekend.
I mean, the next playtest for Voidfall starts in 35 minutes, so yes, I need to.
Yeah. Thank you, and
Thank you very much.
see you next time.